Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter? Like the world was too loud, too big, too far gone for someone like you to make a difference? But here's the truth. Every movement, every act of change, every moment that shaped history began with one person who refused to stay silent, one person who realized that their voice, no matter how small, could ignite others. Because your voice is not just sound, it's a spark. And when that spark spreads, it becomes collective power. Silence has always been mistaken for peace. We grow up believing that if we just stay quiet, if we avoid confrontation, if we keep our opinions to ourselves, we'll stay safe. But the truth is, silence doesn't protect people. It protects the system. It shields those already in power and hides the pain of those who are not. Every time we choose silence, we make the world a little more comfortable for the wrong to continue. We give permission quietly for injustice to breathe. The system survives on that quiet. It depends on people who look away, who stay polite, who think it's not my problem. But every time we turn away, every time we bite our tongue to avoid discomfort, something inside us begins to dim. Our voice, our courage, our ability to stand for something, it weakens. And over time, silence doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It becomes a habit that protects the very things we claim to oppose. Those who hold power rely on silence more than they rely on control, because silence is control. It keeps people divided, uncertain, afraid of speaking the truth. It makes you doubt the importance of your own voice. That's why so many are told to stay quiet, to be patient, to wait their turn, to avoid being too political. But what they really mean is don't disturb the comfort of those who benefit from your silence. Every act of progress, every movement that ever challenged injustice began when someone broke that quiet, when someone decided that staying silent was no longer safe, because silence doesn't just protect the system, it feeds it. It allows cruelty to hide in plain sight, wrapped in the calmness of quiet. Real peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from justice. And justice has a sound. It's the sound of people finally speaking. Fear sits quietly in the corners of our minds, whispering reasons to stay silent. It tells us that speaking up might cost us something, a job, a friend, a sense of belonging. It tells us that if we just stay quiet, we'll stay safe. And so we obey, we swallow our words, we hide our thoughts, and we let fear decide what kind of person we'll be. That's how silence begins, not as a choice, but as a reaction, a reflex born from the belief that safety lives in quiet. But fear doesn't keep us safe, it keeps us small, it keeps us unseen. Every time we stay quiet because we're afraid, we teach ourselves that our voice isn't worth hearing. We let fear write the story of who we are. And the longer we do it, the louder fear becomes. It grows confident, certain that it can stop us before we even try. That's how it wins, not by force, but by convincing us to silence ourselves. Courage doesn't mean the fear disappears. Courage means we speak even when the fear is still there. It means saying what matters even if our voice shakes. Courage isn't loud or perfect. Sometimes it's just a whisper that refuses to die. It's the moment you realize that the cost of staying silent is heavier than the risk of being heard. When courage steps in, fear loses its power. It can't control a voice that's already chosen truth. The moment you speak, even one sentence, even one word, you break the pattern. You remind yourself that you are not powerless. Courage doesn't erase fear. It transforms it into fuel. And that transformation is what creates change. Because when one person dares to speak, others start to believe they can too. The world doesn't need people who are never afraid. It needs people who are brave enough to act in spite of that fear. Every voice that rises against silence becomes a signal, a reminder that courage is contagious. And when courage spreads, fear begins to fade. One act of bravery can turn a whisper into a movement, and a movement into a new reality. That's how change begins. Not when fear disappears, but when courage decides to speak anyway. Change doesn't begin in halls of power or behind closed doors. It begins in the hearts and voices of ordinary people. The world has always moved forward because someone, somewhere decided to speak. Not someone famous, not someone powerful, just someone who refused to stay quiet. Ordinary voices have started revolutions, shifted cultures, and rewritten the rules of what's possible. Every great change we admire today was once just a single voice breaking through the noise of indifference. The beauty of an ordinary voice is its honesty. It carries truth without pretense, pain without polish, and hope without permission. It's the sound of someone who has felt the weight of silence and chooses to lift it, even if only for a moment. When you speak from that place, from lived experience, from empathy, from conviction, you remind others that they can speak too. And that's how momentum begins. One voice becomes two, two become many. Suddenly, what felt small starts to feel unstoppable. Power doesn't like ordinary voices because they are unpredictable. They don't follow scripts. They don't ask for approval. They come from everywhere: classrooms, streets, homes, workplaces, carrying truths that can't be filtered or controlled. That's what makes them powerful. Systems rely on silence, but people rely on connection. And every time an ordinary person speaks, they build a bridge between silence and change. You don't need a stage or a title to make an impact. You just need to care enough to speak. Real change doesn't come from perfect speeches. It comes from imperfect truth spoken with sincerity. It comes from people who see something wrong and decide that their voice, however small, is enough to challenge it. That voice becomes a ripple, and ripples become waves. Every ordinary person has the power to shape the extraordinary. You don't have to wait for someone else to lead. You can start where you stand. Your words matter because they remind others that they are not alone. That's where every movement begins, not with power, but with people. And when ordinary people find the courage to speak, they stop being ordinary. They become the sound of change itself. Your voice is more powerful than you think. It may sound small when it leaves your mouth, but once it's heard by another, it becomes something bigger. It becomes connection. It becomes courage. One voice alone can seem fragile, a single sound against the noise of the world. But when it joins with others, it turns into something unstoppable. That's the beauty of collective power. It doesn't start with a crowd. It starts with one person daring to speak. When you use your voice, you give permission for others to use theirs. You remind people that they are not alone in what they feel or believe. That spark, that simple act of speaking, lights something in someone else. It travels, it multiplies, and it becomes a movement. No protest, no movement, no change has ever begun with silence. It always begins with someone saying enough. Someone saying, "This can be better." Your voice has the ability to move people, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Real words have energy. They carry emotion, truth, and a sense of shared humanity. And when those words are spoken out loud, they can't be contained. They reach others who have been waiting quietly to hear someone say what they've been feeling all along. That's how collective power forms, through the courage of individuals willing to speak what others have been holding inside. Never underestimate how much your voice matters. Every movement you've ever read about began with a conversation, a story, a sentence spoken at the right time. One person stood up and another followed. And together, those voices became impossible to ignore. Collective power isn't born from wealth or status, it's born from unity. From the moment people decide to lift each other's voices instead of silencing their own. Your words have weight because they carry truth. And when truth is spoken by many, it becomes power. Not the kind of power that controls, but the kind that liberates, the kind that breaks silence and builds solidarity. You may think you're just one voice, but one voice is how every wave begins. Speak, and you'll see how quickly your spark becomes a fire.